Let's begin this morning, though, with the woman on Texas death row. Follows state politics at all, and by now you have likely heard of Melissa Lucio. She was originally scheduled for execution on April 27th, a week from Wednesday, for the death of her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah. But a bipartisan group of Texas lawmakers are making a lot of noise about this case, saying prosecutors need to take another look at it. State Rep Jeff Leach is leading this effort to stop the execution. He is a Republican from Plano who chairs the House Committee on Criminal Justice Reform.
Chairman Leach, welcome back to the program. Let's start with this case. There was no physical evidence in this case. Melissa Lucio's other children both said, or all said rather, there was no abuse by her hand. How did law enforcement, prosecutors, and court after court get this case so wrong?
Well, Jason, it's good to be with you. And those questions, those issues that you just touched on are the exact issues that I and the vast majority of state representatives and senators are asking and seeking answers to. When you have so many questions, you have new evidence, you have nearly half of the jurors, 5 of the 12 jurors, who have said that they feel misled by the initial prosecution and they regret their decision. They don't believe that Ms. Lucio should be executed. When you have all of this right in front of you, as policymakers, we're asking the tough questions, and I would expect the prosecutor in Cameron County, Luis Saenz, to do the same thing. Justice is not served. In fact, the entire justice system is severely weakened if an innocent person is potentially put to death, and we're doing everything that we can, Jason, as I mentioned, to step in and to prevent that from happening.
What does her case say about the criminal justice system in Texas?
Well, her case is a great example of how the system can fail and how the system is imperfect. There's a lot of folks out there, death penalty supporters and death penalty opponents, who are asking the tough questions, which I think we all should do, policymakers and citizens. Ask the tough questions to make sure that where there are weaknesses, we strengthen them. Where there are holes, we fill them. Where there are problems, we solve them. And Ms. Lucio's case, literally at every step of the way, as I've mentioned, there have been problems, severe and substantial problems. And I've lost sleep at night. I know she certainly has, her family has, other legislative colleagues have. But right now, our focus is on preventing her execution on the 27th. It would be a historic, irreversible blunder on the part of the state of Texas, a stain on the history of our great state if we move forward with executing her. And so all we're asking right now is to push the pause button, to review her case, and to make sure that the truth is arrived at and that we don't potentially execute someone who very likely could be innocent.
This case has again exposed one controversial thing that law enforcement does. Law enforcement, as we all know, will sometimes lie to a suspect during interrogation or be coercive to a suspect. That happened in this case with Melissa Lucio. Should police and sheriff's deputies and law enforcement be allowed to do that in Texas?
The answer is no. I don't believe that such wrongfully coercive interrogation tactics like they used in Ms. Lucio's case can or should be used. And I would say that the vast majority of law enforcement agree with me on that. The vast majority of law enforcement are good, decent men and women who want the truth, who want justice, who care more about the justice than just winning a case. In Ms. Lucio's case, if you go view the interrogation video, as I have, she was pregnant at the time. She was deprived of food and water. She was interrogated for over 5 hours by multiple armed officers. She had suffered abuse for many years herself. She denied having anything to do with the incident over 100 times, and they kept badgering her. They kept pushing her. They kept coercing her, to use your words. And that's exactly what they did. They coerced her. And she finally said, "What do you want me to say? I'm responsible." That's all she said. And that's what they hung their entire prosecution on. That is not an admission of guilt. That is a wrongfully coercive interrogation tactic and a weak, vulnerable woman. And many of those tactics, Jason, rightfully so, have been outlawed and are no longer used in the state of Texas.
You're in a position of power, Mr. Chairman, leading the Criminal Justice Reform Committee in the House and the Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committee in the House as well, too. Do you see any legislation coming out of this case next January when you return to Austin?
Well, yeah, we have to look at, we talked about the interrogation tactics that were used. We got to have a conversation about what's right, what's appropriate, and what's not. We talk about the trial in and of itself. She had woefully insufficient counsel. Her defense counsel, in my opinion, should be disbarred from the practice of law. Interestingly, her defense counsel, which lost the case, then just a couple of days later went and worked for the Cameron County DA. That Cameron County DA, which initially prosecuted Ms. Lucio and sought the death penalty, is now behind bars in federal prison for corruption in and of himself. So we got to look at that system. We've got jurors who said that that evidence that they had then, that the defense had then, was not entered into trial. Had the jurors known that at the time, there's no way they would have convicted her, much less given her the death penalty. So we got to look at the trial and then the appellate process, making sure that we're looking at the potential causes of wrongful exonerations and looking at prosecutorial discretion and working with our law enforcement, with prosecutors all across the state to strengthen our system, to ask the tough questions, come up with the right reforms, and to strengthen our system working together.
Mr. Chairman, last question. How many other Melissa Lucios do you think there are right now in Texas prisons?
Well, one is enough. I would say that just knowing that Ms. Lucio's case is out there is enough to cause me to lose a lot of sleep. And I would argue that other policymakers and people across this great state are in the same boat. I do believe there are potentially a handful of other cases, men and women on death row, who need to have their convictions and their sentences looked at. And we ought to not be at all afraid to ask those questions and make sure that we're not potentially executing an innocent fellow Texan.